Also joining us on the dais, our Ambassador to Nepal, Shri Naveen Srivastav, and Joint Secretary North, Shri Anurag Srivastav. Sir, may I hand over the floor to you?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all our friends from the media who have come here for this special briefing on the ongoing visit of the Honorable Prime Minister of Nepal, Mr. Pushp Kumar Dahal Prachanda, to India. As you are all aware, the Prime Minister of Nepal, His Excellency Pushp Kamal Dahal Prachandji, is on an official visit to India. We have just concluded the bilateral engagement between the two Prime Ministers. I would begin by running you through the program and thereafter provide a general sense of the discussions as also the key outcomes which have been achieved during this ongoing visit of Prime Minister Prachanda. This is Prime Minister Prachanda's first bilateral visit abroad since he assumed office as Prime Minister in December last year. Overall, this is his fourth visit to India in his capacity as the Prime Minister of Nepal. Prime Minister Prachand arrived yesterday. Following his arrival, the National Security Advisor called on him yesterday. This morning, Prime Minister Prachand visited Rajghat to pay tribute to Mahatma Gandhi. Thereafter, he was received at Hyderabad House by the Honorable Prime Minister for talks, and after the talks concluded, both Prime Ministers presented their press statements, which you would have all seen. Nepal occupies a very special place under India's Neighbourhood First policy. Our relationship with Nepal is unique and characterized by open borders and civilizational ties that are anchored in our shared cultural and religious traditions, manifesting as strong people-to-people linkages, including those of kinship. The talks between the two Prime Ministers characterized the traditional warmth and cordiality between our two countries. The two leaders engaged in fairly comprehensive and constructive and future-oriented discussions directed towards taking India-Nepal bilateral relationship forward in a manner that is constructive, progressive, and beneficial for both our societies. The discussions and outcomes cover the entire spectrum of bilateral cooperation, including political, economic, trade, energy, connectivity, infrastructure cooperation, and also development partnership. I would briefly share with you key outcomes during the two Prime Ministers' discussion, which were also announced just ahead of the press remarks. Let me start with the power sector, which has been one of the key signature successes of India-Nepal partnership in recent years. As you would recall, India and Nepal had issued a joint vision statement on power sector cooperation in April last year, when former Prime Minister Shri Sher Bahadur Deobaji was visiting India. During the talks today, the two Prime Ministers appreciated the growth in the power sector cooperation and also the export of over 450 megawatts of power from Nepal to India. A major decision today, which was also announced by Honorable Prime Minister in his press remarks, was the understanding by both leaders to increase the quantum of export of power as an objective from Nepal to India to 10,000 megawatts within next 10 years. As regards power generation, an MOU was signed for the development of 480 megawatt Phokot Karnali hydropower power project in western Nepal by NHPC of India. Further, the signing of the project development agreement for the 679 megawatt Lower Arun project by India's Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam was also welcomed by the two Prime Ministers. Besides power generation and power trade, which I just mentioned, there were also achievements in the field of power transmissions, where the two Prime Ministers participated in the groundbreaking of the 400 kV Gorakhpur-Butwal transmission line. This is the second high-capacity interconnection between two countries. India has also decided to fund 3 major transmission corridors in Nepal under the line of credit support of about $680 million. These are Bheri Corridor, Nijgad-Inarwa Corridor, and Gandak-Nepalganj Corridor. As you would have all noticed in the press report some time ago, India has also agreed to permit the first trilateral power transaction from Nepal to Bangladesh via India for up to 40 megawatt of power. During the meeting, the two Prime Ministers also expressed their commitment to achieve tangible and time-bound progress on Pancheshwar multipurpose project. Both sides also concluded, besides this long list of agreements and specific cooperation in the field of hydropower, the both Prime Minister also saw key agreements concluded in the field of cross-border movement of goods, people and finance. Today, India and Nepal signed the revised Treaty of Transit, which would be among the things provide Nepal access to inland waterways of India for the first time. This is effectively once in a generation kind of agreement, which would contribute very significantly to the development of trade and investment linkages between India and Nepal. The two Prime Ministers also inaugurated the twin integrated checkposts in Rupedia in India and Nepalganj in Nepal. Both Prime Ministers also conducted the groundbreaking ceremony of the twin ICPs in Sunauli in India and Bhairava in Nepal. An MOU for the construction of another integrated checkpost in Dodhara Chandni in the far western Nepal under Indian grant assistance was also concluded. India has also decided to fund and build 2 additional bridges across the Mahakali River at Sirsa and Julaghat in Nepal, connecting to Champavat and Pithoragarh districts in India. In the railway sector, both the Prime Ministers presided over the inaugural run of the cross-border freight rail operations between Batnaha in India and Nepal Custom Yard in Nepal on the Jogbani-Biratnagar rail link, which was constructed with the Indian grant assistance. This was accompanied by handing over to the government of Nepal the Kurtha-Bijalpura rail section of the Jayanagar-Kurtha passenger rail link, of which operations were flagged off by the Prime Ministers of India and Nepal last year. India is additionally providing one-time grant for maintenance of the railway infrastructure for Jayanagar-Kurtha rail section. The final location survey of Raxaul-Kathmandu rail link was also handed over to the Nepalese side. It was also agreed that India will provide training and capacity building to Nepal rail officials in the Indian Railway Institutes. The conclusion of the agreement between NPCI International Limited and NCHL of Nepal links our digital payment systems and is yet another significant step in creating seamless financial connectivity between India and Nepal. This also builds on the launch of RuPay card last year. On energy sector, besides the hydropower, the two Prime Ministers also laid the foundation stone for Phase 2 facilities under the Motihari-Amlerganj pipeline. The Phase 1, as you are aware, has been a game changer for the supply of petroleum products to Nepal, ensuring significant cost saving and efficiencies. An MOU was also signed on extension of this pipeline, Motighari Amlekganj pipeline, from Amlekganj to Chitwan, as well as on laying the second major cross-border pipeline infrastructure between Siliguri in India and Jhapa in Nepal. So extension of the existing pipeline and laying of a new cross-border petroleum product pipeline between the two countries. India has also offered Nepal for creating a ground station and supply 300 user terminals to offer the services of South Asia satellite to Nepal under grant assistance. This initiative would promote regional cooperation in the space sector, as also facilitate the utilization of space technology applications in important areas of governance such as medicine, teleeducation, e-governance, and also disaster response. Prime Minister Modi also congratulated Nepal on becoming a founding member of the International Big Cat Alliance. As regards the other elements of the visit, the Prime Minister of Nepal will participate in the Joint Investors Summit. He will also be calling on the Honorable President and Honorable Vice President of India later today. Tomorrow, Prime Minister of Nepal travels to Madhya Pradesh, first to the holy city of Ujjain, and where he would visit the Mahakaleshwar temple. As you are aware, Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji had inaugurated the Sri Mahakal Lok Corridor in Ujjain in October last year. The visit would reflect the depth of our deep-rooted civilizational linkages. Honorable Prime Minister of Nepal will also spend some time in Indore and will have official engagements there, including those relating to visiting the sites relating to solid waste management and also visiting a special economic zone there. The visit of Prime Minister of Nepal to India upholds the long-established tradition of high-level visits and exchanges between the two countries. The outcome-oriented discussions held by Prime Minister Modi ji and Prime Minister Prachand have provided a very robust framework for taking our multifaceted partnership to even greater heights for the benefit of our people here. As you can see from the long list of outcomes spread across pretty much all domains of economic cooperation, these are all classic successful examples of the vision of neighborhood first that Honorable Prime Minister of India has maintained with regard to India's neighborhood. I would stop here and would take whatever questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The ground rules again. Please identify yourself and the organization you represent. I'll start with you, Yeshi.
This is Yeshi Seli from the New Indian Express. Sir, there were no bilaterals in improving air connectivity because Nepal has been requesting that air connectivity be enhanced, especially in the airport at Lumbini. And what were the talks like when both Prime Ministers did talk about resolving cross-border dispute?
Sorry, could you repeat the first one?
The first
Air?
one was air connectivity.
Yeah, what is the question?
Nepal has been asking India to enhance air connectivity, especially to new airports like the one in Lumbini. So.
Okay. Yeah, please.
सर मैं कविता हूँ हरिभूमि न्यूज़पेपर से। सर मेरा सवाल ये है कि दोनों प्रधानमंत्रियों की जो बातचीत हुई है उसमें डिफेंस और सिक्योरिटी का इशू, जिसमें जो नेपाल की तरफ से जो हमेशा जो डिस्प्यूटेड बॉर्डर एरियाज़ हैं उन्हें क्लेम किया जाता है, जैसे लिपू लेक, काला पानी और लिम्पियाधोरा का जो डिस्प्यूट है, उसको लेकर प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ने क्या प्रधानमंत्री प्रचंड के सामने में कोई बात रखी है और उनका किस तरह का रुख रहा है प्रधानमंत्री प्रचंड का, इसके बारे में आप?
Hello sir, Abhishek Jha from CNN News 18. My question is regarding this Agnipath scheme, and Nepalese citizens are not being recruited in this scheme for long now, and whether the two prime ministers did discuss this issue, and what was the overall look on this issue?
Yeah. Mike, behind you. Yeah.
सर मधुरन कुमार न्यूज़ नेशन से मेरा सवाल रेल कनेक्टिविटी को लेकर है। जैसा कि आपने बताया कि रक्सौल से लेकर काठमांडू के बीच जो रेल कनेक्टिविटी पर बातचीत हुई है, उस बारे में नेपाली साइड को हैंड ओवर किया गया है। तो क्या टारगेट प्लान है, कब तक की रेल कनेक्टिविटी का हम प्लान कर रहे हैं? दूसरा सवाल सर हमारा अभिषेक के सवाल से रिलेटेड है। बेसिकली जो गोरखास की भर्ती होती थी हमारे इंडियन आर्मी में, अब वो बंद है अग्निपथ स्कीम के आने के बाद से, तो क्या उसको लेकर कोई बातचीत हुई है?
We'll take the next round. Okay. Yeah, why aren't you sitting? Okay, anyway.
Geeta Mohan from India Today. There are reports of statements from leaders in Nepal, former Prime Minister KP Oli, regarding the Akhand Bharat map in the Indian Parliament. He said that that should be raised by the Nepalese Prime Minister when he meets with the Indian Prime Minister. Was the matter discussed?
There was one more. Neeraj, no. Okay, yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
Sir, Akanksha, Nepali Times. Sir, just two quick questions. One on the Bhutanese refugee crisis that has rocked the entire country right now. A lot of protests in Nepal. In Nepal is also under an international pressure. Was this brought up during the discussion? The Bhutanese refugee, the fake Bhutanese refugee issue. And sir, can we now, on the EPG, was there any discussion on the Eminent Person Group report? Can we now consider it a thing of the past? Thank you.
So let's take this round and then a few more hands.
Can I just pick up different elements of different questions on which the answers are in clear yes and no, so that it becomes easier in terms of responding to the other questions? So the question from Abhishek, part of the question from Abhishek on the recruitment of Gorkhas post the Agnipath scheme. आपका भी प्रश्न गोरखा की रिक्रूटमेंट को लेके था. Question from Akanksha on the question relating to the Bhutanese refugee scam in Nepal, EPG report, and the question there from on the matter of mural, whether that came up or not. To the best of my understanding, during the restricted level talks and during the delegation level talks, these issues were not raised. Yeshi, to your question relating to discussions on air connectivity, the two prime ministers discussed almost all aspects of bilateral connectivity between the two countries. In fact, if you heard, Prime Minister did mention that during his 2014 visit, he had coined the term HIT, highways, infoways and transways, essentially pointing to different elements of connectivity between the two countries. And all these aspects came up. We have already mentioned, I have mentioned in my opening remarks, some of the crucial decisions relating to, for example, infrastructure connectivity, whether it is through the ICPs or it is through the petroleum. I've also listed out the agreement relating to financial connectivity between the NPCIL and NCHL. Air connectivity and how best to intensify as also expand the connectivity between India and Nepal definitely came up for discussion. There are many elements to it. There is element of connectivity between different cities of India and different cities of Nepal. There is also a question of connectivity with different cities of Nepal through different air routes. The principal frame of reference, and you heard this in the remarks by Honorable Prime Minister of Nepal, the principal frame of reference in looking at all broad level issues and specific issues of air connectivity between the two countries is a positive frame of reference. And in that frame, the technical experts will now sit down, look at each of the proposals which are there on the table, and would proceed forward to make appropriate decisions. These are questions which require extensive technical examination, because you do get into airspace. At some points, the airspace is under the domains wherein it interferes into the space which is commanded by Air Force and all that. So there are this is just one of the questions, but there are several other elements which are very important for the technical experts to examine on this. Your second question was relating to the border. In the press remarks of the two Prime Ministers, you heard what Honorable Prime Minister of India said towards the end of his press remarks, and you also heard what Honorable Prime Minister of Nepal said in his remarks with regard to how the border issue, how the boundary issue is to be addressed going forward. I would not like to add anything to those remarks, because those statements speak for themselves. They not only speak of the intent of the two leaders and the two systems, they also speak of the specifics through which that intent is to be carried forward, and I think that is very clearly came out in that statement. कविता जी, जो आपके प्रश्न में जो दो मूलभूत बातें थी, एक तो जो डिस्प्यूट को लेके, उसका उत्तर मैंने आपको स्पष्ट रूप से दे दिया है, लेकिन जो बाकी सेफ्टी और सिक्योरिटी को लेके जो मुद्दे हैं, जो दो समाजों में सिक्योरिटी से मुद्दे जो जुड़े हुए जो प्रश्न हैं, उस पे लेके दोनों नेताओं ने विस्तार में वार्ता की, और उस वार्ता के अंतर्गत किस प्रकार से भारत नेपाल अपना सहयोग बढ़ाएं, किस प्रकार से जो कि दोनों देशों के बीच में जो रेलेवेंट संस्थाएं हैं वो अपना सहयोग बनाएं, ताकि जो भी ये सेफ्टी सिक्योरिटी की समस्याएं हैं उनको उचित रूप से ग्राउंड लेवल पे अच्छी तरह से निवारण हो सके। इन समस्याओं का स्वरूप क्या है, इन समस्याओं में क्या क्या चुनौतियां हैं जो दोनों समाजों के सामने उत्पन्न होती हैं, ये अच्छी तरह से विस्तृत रूप से दोनों प्रधानमंत्री के बीच में सहयोग का क्या परिप्रेक्ष्य हो, इन सब चुनौतियों को एड्रेस करने के लिए उसमें विस्तार में वार्ता हुई थी। रेल कनेक्टिविटी, एज आई जो रेल कनेक्टिविटी में जो रक्सौल काठमांडू का जो FLS फील्ड लेवल सर्वे है, वो हाल ही में नेपाल सरकार को दिया गया है। अब हम नेपाल सरकार के कमेंट्स उस फील्ड लेवल सर्वे पे क्या होंगे उसकी अपेक्षा कर रहे हैं। शीघ्र जैसे ही वो हमारे पास आएगा, उसके बाद अगले कदम यानी कि रक्सौल काठमांडू का जो रूट है उसका उस पे DPR, उस पे जो आगे टेक्निकल क्षेत्र में जो भी कार्य होने हैं, वो कार्य से पहले हमें नेपाल के उत्तर की प्रतीक्षा है हमारे फील्ड लेवल सर्विस के डॉक्यूमेंट को। एक बार वो रिप्लाई आ जाता है तो इस प्रोजेक्ट की टाइमलाइन क्या हो उसको सुनिश्चित करना थोड़ा सरल हो जाएगा।
थैंक यू सर। नीरज हो गया? यस प्लीज।
My name is Ranjit Kumar. Foreign Secretary, did the Nepalese PM raise the issue of Ranjit Kumar? Did the Nepalese PM raise the issue of peace and friendship treaty with the Indian Prime Minister during conversations?
You please introduce your organization also, just for record.
I am freelance.
Yeah, that's it.
Question of what?
Peace and friendship treaty. Was it raised? Treaty of peace and friendship, sir. Who's handed as a Kalol? Yeah.
Karlol from the Hindu, sir. Sir, there are reports that the Nepalese government is in the Nepalese government is in talks with certain companies in China for purchase of military hardware. Has India expressed its opinion on this purchase that's currently under process?
Yeah, go ahead. Microphone.
So Manas from PTI. Sir, just want to know, in fact, I mean, how significant is this, the power trade arrangement between India, Bangladesh and Nepal? And are you looking at expanding it to some other countries in the future?
Who else do you have in mind? I'm just curious at the broad nature. Anyway, I'll let the Foreign Secretary answer. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So Sridhar from the Asian Age. So we all saw in the past few years, especially during Mr. Oli's tenure as Prime Minister, how Nepal had a very pronounced tilt towards China. So during the talks today, were any Indian concerns and sensitivities raised with the Nepalese PM regarding the China factor?
The preface is your comment, right? Let me just clarify that.
Well,
The
there was
first-
a setback to ties during
I
Mr.
don't
Oli's tenure.
Tilt toward China is your language. Okay, Pranay.
सर प्रणय उपाध्याय एबीपी न्यूज से भारत और नेपाल के बीच में खुली सीमा है और पिछले कुछ समय में लगातार ये रिपोर्ट्स आई हैं कि नेपाल से सटे हुए जो बॉर्डर के इलाके हैं और नेपाल के क्षेत्र में के जो इलाके हैं वह डेमोग्राफिक चेंज हुआ है और खासतौर पर जो प्रतिबंधित संगठन पीएफआई है उसकी कार्यवाहियों के मद्देनजर तो क्या भारत ने इस मामले में अपनी चिंताएं उठाई हैं और क्या इस बारे में नेपाल की तरफ से कोई आश्वासन दिया गया है?
एक और हाथ था किसी का? या आप बताएं।
सर मैं विशाल पांडे हूं जी न्यूज से। प्रधानमंत्री ने रामायण सर्किट के बारे में तेजी लाने की बात कही है, किस प्रकार की तेजी आएगी और किन परियोजनाओं पर अभी काम आगे बढ़ेगा, क्या कोई टारगेट रखा गया है?
Okay, I'll take one last question there. At the end, yeah.
Sandhya IT. So quickly just want to know how the financial part of this first trilateral is going to be panned out. Is India going to get some sort of a benefit financially while exporting that
power?
Power, yeah. And a quick one on NPCI bit. Do we have a vision on how big are we planning to do that with Nepal?
What?
In terms of numbers, do you have any numbers?
Sorry, could you repeat the second part of the question?
The NPCI partnership, where for digital collaboration, do we have some sort of a financial target around that?
The MOU that was signed today?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll close with that.
Sorry,
Thank you.
excuse me. What do you mean by financial target of a financial interoperable platform? What is the reference to financial target that you're talking about, if I can better understand?
Are we going to cover the entire Indians or also the entire population there? Do we have some sort of a bifurcation around that?
Thank you. Let me start with the last question first. To my limited understanding of how these platforms work and what exactly do they entail in terms of the mechanisms in which they operate, this is essentially a mechanism between NPCIL and NCHL of Nepal, wherein the financial payments between the two countries across various types of commercial transactions would get eased up very, very considerably. So you could say, in a way, ease of payment of business transactions. This operates on a certain principle that the company providing the platform in India and the company which is in Nepal will provide these interoperable platforms that talk to each other so that the citizens on both sides can make the relevant payments for their transactions which they carry out. The scope in terms of coverage of the population, the scope in terms of what kind of transactions would be covered or not, is a very evolving frame. So you might start with something, I wouldn't say as a pilot really, but let's say starts with a certain limited set of designated payments for an identified set of transactions, which then over a period of time grows and then covers larger population metrics, but also cover the larger set of transactions. You would recall last year we had launched the RuPay card between the two countries. From that launch to today, the use of RuPay card has expanded very significantly between the two countries. Likewise, we hope that with this MOU between NPCIL and NCHL, the other forms of payments which were earlier on not available to the consumers for paying their transactions would now be available. And hence, naturally, this will expand the two businesses also on both sides. There is a certain element of fee-based transaction that goes into it, which will also add to the further economic contributions and gain within the two systems that use it. I do not have the exact targets, so to speak, fixed in this, but the intention is to try and ensure that most of the retail transactions which take place, which are conducted by the consumers, get covered increasingly through these systems of financial connectivity, so that it makes it very easier not just for the consumers but also for the regulators and the people in between. This, frankly, is a very significant step, not just between the two countries, but also in the expansion of the entire concept of financial connectivity between India and the other countries. So it's good to see that in our neighborhood, increasingly now, other countries are also joining, Nepal being the latest example for this. जी न्यूज़ का जो प्रश्न था रामायणा सर्किट को लेके, तो उससे परियोजनाएं, उससे जुड़ी हुई परियोजनाओं को लेके, तो इस विषय पे प्रधानमंत्री जी ने स्पष्ट रूप से कहा है कि रामायणा सर्किट की जो भी परियोजनाएं हैं उसको जल्दी से जल्दी कारगर करके जो दोनों देशों के बीच में एक बहुत ही गहन और महत्वपूर्ण समाजों के बीच में जो एक सांस्कृतिक और जो एक धार्मिक श्रद्धा भाव के जो संबंध हैं उनको और गहरा किया जाए, उनको और ज़्यादा बढ़ाया जाए। तो इनसे जुड़ी जो परियोजनाएं हैं उनका जो है इस समय एक उनका चिन्हीकरण की प्रक्रिया चल रही है। उसके बाद इस पे जो स्पेसिफिक इन परियोजनाओं की जो डीपीआर हैं उस पे काम, और फिर बाद में उनके एग्जीक्यूशन पे काम होगा। प्रणय, जो आपका प्रश्न था सीमावर्ती क्षेत्रों में जो डेमोग्राफिक चेंजेस हुए हैं और उससे जुड़ी जो आपकी जो भी जिज्ञासाएं थी जिसको आपने व्यक्त किया, देखिए, जब दोनों प्रधानमंत्रियों जी के बीच में बात हुई तो एक जो हमारे सहयोग और सहकार्य का जो एक महत्वपूर्ण परिप्रेक्ष्य है वो परिप्रेक्ष्य है दोनों समाजों की में सुरक्षा और उनकी जो सिक्योरिटी है। नेचुरली दोनों समाजों की सुरक्षा में अब जो जो चुनौतियां सामने आती हैं, और ये चुनौतियां आज की नहीं हैं, पुरानी हैं, इन चुनौतियों का किस प्रकार से दोनों देशों की संस्थाएं मिल के सामना करें, किस संदर्भ में सामना करें, उसको लेके क्या सहयोग हो, उसको लेके क्या सहकार्य हो, उस पर जो है दोनों प्रधानमंत्रियों के बीच में बात हुई है। और बातचीत से ये स्पष्ट है कि दोनों देश एक दूसरे की जो सुरक्षा से जुड़ी जो चुनौतियां हैं उनके प्रति संवेदनशील हैं, और न केवल संवेदनशील हैं, उनको मिटिगेट करने के लिए अपना सहयोग और सहकार्य बढ़ाने के लिए भी पूर्णतया तत्पर है। Sridhar, there was another question relating to the how significant is the trilateral cooperation between the two countries in the hydropower field, and I mean, are we referring to include other countries in this? Look, you have seen yourself hydropower cooperation specifically and power cooperation generally speaking is a very important element of not just cooperation between India and other countries of region. So in this case, if you were to look at power cooperation between India and Bangladesh, stands on its own. India-Nepal we have spoken extensively about it. The consideration that power trade should open between Nepal through the Indian grid for Bangladesh is part of a larger thinking that we have a great opportunity, given the kind of power availability, power generating, power transmission network that exists in the region. There is an excellent opportunity to use power and power trade, including in the field of hydropower, as a very important instrument of strengthening regional connectivity. This is the first effort in that direction, wherein our objective is that 40 megawatt of power from Nepal could transit through the Indian grid and go to Bangladesh. What benefit would it entail to India? I think the better frame to look at that would be what benefit it would do to the region. And I think it brings in considerable and significant benefits to the region. To the question, there were a couple of questions relating to elements involving China, the extent of whether that was discussed or not. You would have seen from my remarks, you would have seen everything that came out from the two prime ministers in their press remarks, that overwhelming focus of discussions between the two prime ministers, pretty much absolute focus of every single achievement and outcome that has come out of the visit is on strengthening India-Nepal partnership, particularly development partnership, and also strengthening and expanding the areas of economic cooperation. When it came to discussions of the wider developments in the region, naturally the two prime ministers discussed what are the developments in the region, what challenges they pose to our bilateral cooperation India-Nepal, and how exactly should India and Nepal cooperate to mitigate those challenges. That also was discussed between the two prime ministers. That's it pretty much. Treaty of friendship, etc. No, that was not raised during the discussions between the two prime ministers.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks also to Naveen Srivastava, Ambassador, as well as to Anurag Srivastava, Joint Secretary North. Thank you all for joining us. Good afternoon.